Hey guys, tonight we're sailing into one of the deadliest legends of the Middle Ages, the ghost ship. You've heard the stories. An empty vessel drifting through the dark, sails full with no wind, crew nowhere to be seen. Sounds mysterious, right? Yeah, no. In the medieval world, spotting one wasn't an adventure. It was your death sentence. The stench of rot would hit first, then the cold, and then figures would appear on deck. Not living, not gone, just waiting. Once they fixed their eyes on you, there was no rescue, no escape. By the time you saw a medieval ghost ship, you were already part of its crew. So before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wanted an adventure at sea, didn't you? The romance of the open water, the distant horizon, the wind in your hair. Well, congratulations. You've got it. Only problem is, it's the 14th century, and your vessel is about as safe as a wooden coffin with a sail strapped to it. Which, come to think of it, isn't far from the truth. You're standing on the deck in the dead of night, the planks beneath your feet slick with seawater and something less identifiable that you hope is tar. The air is a mix of brine, pitch, and the unwashed humanity crammed into the hold below. Overhead, the rigging groans with every shift of the wind, ropes twisting like a nest of old snakes. You'd like to think the sound is just the ship working with the waves, but there's a rhythm to it tonight, something that almost feels like breathing. The horizon is gone, swallowed by a black so deep it seems solid. Even the moon has turned traitor, hiding behind thick, low clouds that crawl across the sky like they're in no hurry. All around you is the sound of water slapping against the hull, but it's not the cheerful, foamy splash you might imagine. It's a slow, deliberate lapping, as if the sea itself is considering whether to take the ship now or wait until you're farther from shore. Salt stings your lips and nostrils, carried on a wind that isn't strong enough to dry the sweat on your back. You've been on this ship for 2 days, or maybe it's been a month. You're not sure anymore. And already, you understand the first rule of medieval sailing. The ocean isn't your highway, it's your jailer. Somewhere in the dark, a loose block bangs against the mast, sharp and irregular, like a warning knock you can't quite place. The man at the tiller mutters under his breath, not to you, but to whatever might be listening in the night. He doesn't glance your way, which is fine. You've already learned that sailors here have little patience for the wide-eyed and clueless, especially at night. Especially when the sea feels wrong. You try to tell yourself that the feeling is just in your head, the way every groan of timber sounds more ominous when you can't see your own hands. But the truth is, there's a tension hanging over the deck tonight that's got nothing to do with the weather. The ship is old, older than anyone here can remember. She has no name painted on her stern, no carved figurehead to part the waves, just a battered prow that rises out of the water like a clenched fist. Her sails are patched in a dozen different colors of canvas, flapping half-heartedly against a wind that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The wood beneath the tar smells faintly of rot, the kind that starts deep in the grain and never stops eating. Even the rats give certain corners of the hold a wide berth. You hear footsteps behind you, light, deliberate, not the heavy shuffle of your shipmates, and you turn, but there's no one there. Just the dim outline of the forecastle and the ropes coiled in the shadows. You wait for the sound again, telling yourself it was only your imagination, the ship settling in the swell. But you're lying to yourself, and deep down you know it. You're already starting to understand that this isn't just a ship. It's something else entirely. something older than the men who sail it, older than the trade routes it follows, older than the stories whispered in the cramped bunks below deck. The older crew members avoid talking about it in daylight, but you've heard enough scraps of conversation to piece together the bones of it. Ships vanish out here. Not in storms, not in battles, not in the way men can explain away over ale and a shrug. They vanish into something else, and sometimes, just sometimes, they come back. Changed. The wood looks the same. The sails still catch wind. But the crew? The crew doesn't look at you the same way. And if you stand too close to the hull, you can hear voices under the water, speaking in a language you don't recognize but somehow understand all the same. Tonight, you're standing on one of those ships. Maybe it's not obvious yet. The men still move about their duties. The ropes still creak. The sea still breathes against the hull. But there's something in the air that doesn't belong. A pressure, like the moment before a lightning strike. You can't see it, but you can feel it in your teeth. And if you were smart, you'd turn around and get off this ship right now. But you're not smart. You're curious. And that's exactly how these stories start. By the time you realize you've stepped onto a deck that isn't entirely part of this world anymore, it's far too late. You wake to the gentle sensation of something warm and whiskered, trotting across your face. Romance dies fast at sea. Your eyes crack open to the underside of a deck plank 6 inches above your nose, furred with salt crystals and something grayer you don't investigate. The hammock has sagged in the night, so your spine bows like a fishing rod in your blanket. Generous word for a damp, oily rag. Smells like it was wrung out of a whale. The rot in the fabric has its own ecosystem. Mildew, old sweat, and last week's stew, steamed to perfection by human breath. The rat that announced your morning is already gone, claws ticking along the beam, but you can still feel phantom feet on your cheek. The worst part is you're grateful it was only a rat. Sometimes it's lice. Sometimes it's another sailor. Above you, the ship groans, a tired animal turning in its sleep. Then it isn't sleep at all. The hull heaves hard to starboard, and your hammock swings like a bell clapper. You grab for the edge, miss, and the world becomes wood. Your shoulder meets a rib, your knee finds a bucket, and a heartbeat later, a lungful of seawater completes the greeting. It pours down the companionway in a glittering sheet and slaps the deck, carrying with it chips of tar, fish scales, and the venerable bouquet of the bilge. You cough until your ribs ache and taste rust and salt, then sputter to your knees in a puddle that's technically alive. Dawn isn't here yet. The sun's still arguing with the horizon, but the North Atlantic does not keep bankers' hours, and apparently neither do you. The smell down here is an education you didn't ask for. Salt rides shotgun with rancor notes. Stale ale sweated through bodies. Sour wool. Damp rope. The sweet sick reek of slop that missed someone's mouth and found a dark corner to become a new life form. The bilge speaks in bubbles and burps. Tar tries to cover it all like a guilty priest with a small ladle of holy water. Your stomach makes a decision without consulting you, and you lean over the bucket that dented your knee and donate last night's hardtack to Neptune. It tastes the same coming up, just with regret. No one rushes to ask if you're all right. No one hands you water or pats your back. A bare foot kicks your hip because you're under the ladder and people have places to be. Up, someone grunts, as if you were a crate in the way and not a person. That's how it works here. Your body is a tool. The deck is the bench, and the ocean is the foreman who doesn't speak your language, but still finds ways to make his meaning clear. You haul yourself to the ladder and climb into air that is somehow colder and dirtier at once. The wind knifes through your clothes and the spray salts your eyelashes. The sky is a lid of pewter pressed low enough to skim the mastheads, and the eastern edge is only a suggestion of gray. The ship bucks again and you lurch, catching a stay with both hands as the deck tips and hurls a wave against your shins. Your boots were wet yesterday and never unwet. Now they slosh. Somewhere aft, a boy laughs and then coughs until the laugh is a wheeze. Somewhere forward, a man is singing a hymn with the teeth missing that give it a new melody. The mate's voice scrapes across the wind, making sentences out of curses. Hands to the braces, he says without bothering to say please, and you go because you're a hand and those are the braces. The rope is swollen and rough. It burns through your palms and leaves and splinters like tiny sermons. You throw your weight against the line with the others and feel the ship answer, canvas booming overhead like a drum the sky is beating. Spray stings your face and slips down your collar. Your stomach heaves again, but you clamp your jaw and swallow bile along with pride. There are men on either side of you who have been sick every day for a decade and haven't fallen overboard yet. No one cares that your insides are trying to abandon ship. You're here to work, not to have a delicate conversation with your organs. Between orders and effort, your eyes keep snagging on the horizon, or what passes for one, a seam of darker dark, where water and air pretend they're not conspiring. Every few breaths, the ship lifts and gives you a glimpse of something that isn't wave. It's far. It's wrong. It's probably a cloud. You tell yourself it's a cloud because the other options have teeth. The wind shifts and brings a new smell that does not belong to this living vessel. A faint sweetness like flowers left too long in a warm room. You look for its source and find only men cursing, ropes singing, and the sea smiling without lips. A gull rides a gust and laughs at you, then veers away like it remembered an appointment somewhere less doomed. The captain stalks the quarterdeck with a cloak that seems to be made of night and disapproval. His face is salted leather, and his eyes are the color of bruises. He doesn't look at you, which would be a kindness if his not looking didn't feel like a verdict. The boatswain cracks a length of rope on the rail, and the sound is a gunshot, a reminder that the only soft thing on this ship is your head, and it better get harder soon. You find a rhythm, because rhythm is the only antidote to fear you can afford. Haul, brace, belay, breathe. The sea slaps you and you slap back by staying upright. A memory of land tries to bloom in your mind. Bread that isn't salted to immortality. A bed that doesn't swing like a drunk monk, but it withers in the wind. The ship gives a long, low creak that climbs into a whine you feel in your teeth. And for a heartbeat, everyone goes quiet as if listening for a verdict from the deep. Then someone spits, someone laughs too loudly, and the work swallows the moment. You are seasick, sleep-starved, and salted to the marrow, and the day hasn't even started. That's fine. No one here needs you comfortable. They need you to pull, climb, tie, and keep your feet when the deck doesn't want you to have them. You swallow hard, taste iron, and set your hands to the rope again. The ocean inhales, the ship shudders, and somewhere beyond the gray, something inhales with it. From the dock, it probably looked noble enough. Broad-bellied, high-masted, sails patched but proud, ready to swallow the horizon whole. That illusion lasted right up until you stepped aboard and realized this isn't the graceful swan of your imagination. It's a wooden rickshaw in a bad mood, a collection of planks and tar lashed together by men who measured quality in how fast they could launch it. The hull creaks like it's still debating whether to hold hands with itself. Every board has its own opinion about which way to warp, and they all change their minds whenever the waves shift. Nails aren't hammered in so much as persuaded, and the seams between planks are stuffed with whatever was handy. Oakum, hair, bits of rag, before being slathered in pitch that never quite stops leaking onto your clothes. You're not sailing in a ship, so much as trying to stay inside a large wooden question mark that happens to float. Below decks, the air is thick enough to chew. You can't stand upright without hitting your head on a beam, and your shoulders scrape the walls if you breathe too wide. Hammocks swing above barrels of salted meat sweating in their brine, sacks of grain already gnawed by weevils, and ropes coiled like sleeping snakes. There's no clean line between cargo and crew quarters. Sometimes you sleep next to a barrel of ale, sometimes next to a crate of chickens, and sometimes next to a man who smells like both. The lanterns gutter with every tilt of the hull, sending shadows lurching across the curved walls, so it always looks like something's moving in the corners. There is no private space, no escape from the smells, and no fresh air unless you crawl back topside and risk being doused in cold spray. And this isn't just an unpleasant ride. It's dangerous in ways that aren't poetic. The sea doesn't need to send a storm to kill you. A plank splitting mid-voyage could open a seam wide enough to let the Atlantic climb in, and there's no such thing as a quick repair when you're hundreds of miles from land. One unlucky wave could pitch you overboard, and unless someone saw you fall, you'd simply vanish into the foam, maybe spotted days later as something pale and bloated rolling with the swell. Fire is worse. A single overturned lamp could turn this floating tinderbox into a roaring pyre, and there's nowhere to run that isn't more water than you can drink before you drown. The navigation is barely worthy of the word. You've got a crude compass, the stars when the sky isn't sulking behind clouds, and something the captain calls dead reckoning, which basically means guessing how far you've gone in a straight line when you're not even sure what a straight line is anymore. Currents can trick you, winds can betray you, and when both happen at once, you can spend a week sailing confidently in entirely the wrong direction. If the weather turns foul, you huddle below decks and listen to the timbers scream, hoping the captain isn't the superstitious sort who'll decide someone angered the gods and needs to be tossed overboard. And that's before you add other people to the list of things that want you dead. The sea is thick with pirates. Men who've decided the best way to earn a living is to take yours. They come fast, low to the water, riding ships built for speed. If they catch you, there's no romantic sword fight on the deck, just quick violence and the question of whether you'll be worth more alive or stripped and floating. Even honest traders can turn opportunistic if they think your cargo or crew will fetch a good price in the next port. Out here, the horizon isn't just where the world ends. It's where trouble starts running toward you. Every time you leave harbor, you gamble. You gamble that the wood will hold, that the wind will favor you, that no hidden shoal will rise up to crack the hull like an egg, and that the men with black sails stay busy elsewhere. You gamble that your captain's charts are more than pretty lines drawn in boredom, and that he knows when to reef the sails instead of daring the sky to prove him wrong. But you've already seen how often those bets go bad. There's a reason every sailor carries charms against drowning, and a reason they speak of the ocean as if it's a living thing that notices insolence. This vessel is your home now, your only defense against the water's hunger. It's also your greatest threat. Every creak, every sway, every cold drop that works its way through the seams is a reminder that you're riding inside a hollow shell held together by tar, prayer, and stubbornness. Ghosts or no ghosts, you've already boarded a death trap. The only question is whether the sea takes you quietly or decides to make a spectacle of it. You learn your shipmates by smell before you learn them by name. The air down here is soup, sweat, salt, stale beer, fish oil, and something coppery that could be blood or someone's attempt at dentistry. The men are a museum of injuries wrapped in wool, scarred brows, ears chewed flat by frost and fists, noses that look like they were negotiated rather than grown. Missing fingers are so common you start to think knuckles are optional. A man they call Little John, who is neither, keeps 3 teeth like stubborn tenants, and he grins with them the way a cat shows claws. Another, Henrik, has a glass marble wedged where an eye should be. He claims it sees storms before the sky does. Whether or not that's true, you find yourself checking which way he's facing when the wind shifts. They talk in a grammar of grunts and spit, laced with prayers and curses that mix saints and sea gods without worrying about doctrine. Everyone has a knife. Some tuck theirs in their boots, some wear them on cords around their necks, and one man, a wiry lad called Cobb, keeps his in the sleeve of his jerkin, so it drops into his palm like a conjurer's coin when he flicks his wrist. They also have charms, and they take them as seriously as they take blades. Bits of bone, coins with holes drilled through, crude saints whittled from driftwood, pouches of hair and herbs tied so tightly they look ready to burst. One man wears a dried seahorse on a thong. Another keeps a small blue stone stitched into his hem. He says it's a mermaid's tear, and touches it whenever thunder speaks. The ship is bristling with amulets, a hedgehog of fear and faith. You try to find a corner to be alone in, and learn there are no corners at sea, only places other people aren't using for 30 seconds. The deck is an open marriage. The hold is a pile of strangers breathing each other's air. Privacy is a shore leave word. If you turn your back to adjust your clothes, you will have an audience of rats and men pretending not to watch. Bathing is a rumor that died young. The closest anyone gets to deodorant is hanging their shirt near a puff of smoke until it smells like they fought a chimney. You stop pretending you're different after day 3. Your body joins the communal odor like a newly minted citizen. They test you, of course, the way dogs test a new dog. At first it's jokes about your soft hands and your land legs, your habit of saying please to ropes and sorry to barrels. Then they see what makes you flinch. A shout behind your back. A rolling pin dropped next to your foot. A hand clamped, too friendly, on your neck. You learn to keep your face still and your words in your mouth. You also learn where each man keeps his temper and what price buys it. Rum buys most tempers, and so does boredom. The only thing cheaper is fear. At mess you sit elbow to elbow on a plank that likes to bite, and you share a bowl with a man whose beard contains its own anchorage. He tells you about the time a sail ripped like paper and took a man with it, the way his scream thinned as he went skyward. He tells you about a night watch where the lanterns went out without wind, and the sea glowed green like lanterns under the skin. He does not tell you his real name. Nobody does. Names are fragile. Nicknames are harder to kill. There are rules here, none written and all enforced. Don't whistle. Whistling summons wind, and the wrong wind listens too well. Don't step over a coil of rope like it's a fallen tree. It's not. It's someone's livelihood, and you're not the king of it. Don't say the quiet words out loud. Drown. Wreck. Last. If someone tosses bread to the gulls, don't stop him, because he's feeding news to the souls of the drowned, and you don't want them hungry. If a man touches the charm at his throat before climbing, you touch yours, even if yours is only a button you've decided is lucky. It's contagious, the way terror becomes ritual. By the end of the week, you have a charm too. A knuckle of driftwood that looks vaguely like a fish. You don't believe in it. You also don't sail without it. Violence is not a distant possibility, but a weather pattern. It blows in fast and leaves dents. A joke runs long, a hand wanders toward a flask, a glance holds half a second too much contempt, and then there's a clatter of bowls and the scrape of a bench, and 2 men are knots and teeth. The circle opens around them like an eye. Nobody breaks it up unless a blade flashes, and then the boatswain appears with a voice like an oar across the spine and a length of rope that can both tie and teach. Afterward, the men pant, bleeding from lips and pride, and go back to work with the strange, efficient amnesia sailors have about harm. You learn to move early and predict the gusts. You also learn the speed at which laughter turns into shouting, and the exact sound a knife makes when it leaves a sheath in a hurry. Still, there are graces in this rough chapel. A man with hands like driftwood, fingers a lute whose strings went to war long ago, and coaxes a hymn out of it that makes the hair on your arms rise. Someone mends your split knuckle without asking your name, dabbing it with a tincture that burns like penance. The cook, a despot of onions, finds an extra heel of bread for the boy who hasn't stopped coughing since Brittany, and nobody mentions it because pity is a currency you can't be seen spending. Stories move like contraband. A woman with hair like night who walked on the water, a bell you can hear under certain reefs, a ship without crew that salutes before it takes you. By the second week, You stop expecting kindness and start respecting competence. The men who last don't talk much, don't waste movement, don't stare into the distance unless they're asking it something. They tie a clove hitch in the dark with wet hands and can sleep in a thunderstorm by closing one eye and letting the other guard their knife. They carry saints and sins in the same pocket. And when rum comes out, the knife comes closer. You keep a space around your cup like a saint's halo and practice drinking without blinking. Because on this ship, trust is time-limited, luck is rented, and the man sharing your blanket tonight could be the man who tests the edge of your knife tomorrow. It starts the way trouble often does out here. Not with a shout, but with a lowered voice. You're coiling rope near the foremast when you notice two of the older hands talking, their words shaped more for each other than for the wind. You can't catch every phrase, just enough to hear lights and port bow, and the sort of chuckle men make when they want to pretend they're not uneasy. One of them spits over the rail, but it's not the casual kind. It's a deliberate offering, the way a man might feed a stray dog he hopes will go away. The other rubs the charm on his wrist until the leather creaks. When they see you looking, they change the subject so fast you could almost believe you imagined it. Almost. By nightfall, the whispers have spread. You hear it in the galley, between the clang of pots. You hear it below deck, where the lantern light sways and turns faces into conspiracies. Men mention a glow seen 2 nights ago, pale and steady, sitting low on the water like a lantern on a table. Not firelight, too cold for that. Not moonlight, too still, and it moved against the wind. That's the detail they linger on, letting it hang there in the smoke-stained air, waiting for someone to explain how a ship could run straight into the teeth of the breeze and not slow down. No one does. The stories shift with the teller. One man says the light was joined by another, then another, until there were a dozen, like windows in a floating inn. Another swears he saw the dark shape of sails behind the glow, tattered but full, making no sound. A boy claims he heard singing over the water, slow and wordless, and though the others laugh at him, it's a hollow sound. The laughter dies quickly, and someone mutters a prayer you've heard before but can't place. Even the ones who scoff still glance toward the port bow when they think no one is watching. You decide to ask the captain, because he's the sort of man who dismisses foolishness with a snort and a boot heel. You find him on the quarterdeck, hands folded behind his back, gaze fixed somewhere too far to see. You tell him what you've heard, and he cuts you off before you finish. "Sailors talk," he says, his voice as flat as the horizon. You keep your eyes on your work and your ears out of their mouths. He turns away, and the conversation is over. But when the wind shifts and the lantern light brushes his face, you catch something in his eyes. Not fear exactly, but a wariness that sits deep, like an old scar under the skin. It's the look of a man who has seen enough to know when not to laugh. That night you stand the middle watch, when the world is made of black water and colder air. The ship rocks gently, timbers muttering to themselves, sails breathing in and out. You can't help scanning the port side. At first there's nothing but the restless shimmer of starlight on the swell. Then you notice a glimmer far off, small and constant, refusing to blink out no matter how the waves rise between you. It's faint enough that you might mistake it for a trick of the eyes, but it doesn't fade and it doesn't drift with the wind. It's simply there, as though it has been there longer than you've been looking. You think about waking someone, but you already know the answer you'll get. Best not to talk about it. Best not to give it shape with words. Instead, you watch it until your eyes burn, until the bell changes, and another man takes your place, and you leave him with nothing more than a nod. But as you head below, you notice him glancing to port before settling into his stance. He saw it too. By morning, the whispers are sharper, the way they get when men want to believe they're not afraid but can't quite manage it. They talk of ghost ships, vessels crewed by the dead, cursed to sail forever. Ships that appear to warn of storms, or to lure you onto rocks, or to claim you for their crew. The details change, but the ending is always the same. If you see one, you're already too close. You try to tell yourself these are just tales, ballast for long voyages. But when you look for the captain, he's already on deck, staring out toward the horizon where the light was, his jaw tight, his hands still. And in that moment, you understand that stories don't have to be true to be dangerous. Out here, superstition isn't a hobby. It's ballast. Every man carries some private collection of rules and rituals as if they're extra rations, and he guards them with the same seriousness. You learn them the hard way, mostly by breaking them and seeing the faces of the crew twist as if you'd just struck the mast with an axe. The first time you whistle on deck, just to pass the time, a man lunges at you like you've spat in his drink. You call in the wind, he snarls, and you stammer that you didn't know, that you were only keeping a tune. He doesn't care. Whistling summons the wind, and the wind might answer in a way that tears the sails to ribbons or hurls the ship onto rocks. The fact that the air is calm now doesn't matter. The fact that you meant no harm doesn't matter either. You've spoken to something older than you, and you don't get to decide what it says back. Then there's the albatross. You spot one trailing the ship one gray morning, wings outstretched like a crucifix against the sky, and for a heartbeat, you think how fine it would be to have fresh meat instead of salted pork. You mention it, and the men within earshot freeze, staring at you like you've just suggested burning the Bible. An albatross is not a bird to them. It's a spirit, a good luck sentinel, maybe even a drowned sailor's soul come to watch over the voyage. Kill one, and you don't just doom the ship, you invite the sea itself to pass judgment. They tell you stories of men who tried, and the sudden squalls that swallowed them before they could reload their crossbows. You nod, and keep your hunger to yourself. The bird circles above for days, and you find yourself saluting it when no one's watching. Speaking of the dead, you don't speak of them. Ever. Not by name, not by deed, not even in jest. The reasoning shifts with the teller. Some say it draws the dead back, others that it invites you to join them. But the effect is the same. When the sea takes someone, they are gone in all ways but one. Their boots might be worn by another man, their hammock claimed before sunset, their share of rum divided, but their name is never uttered again. The only exception is in prayer, and even then it's whispered like a confession. Some of the superstitions make sense if you squint. Don't set sail on a Friday. Don't point at the moon. Don't turn a loaf upside down. Others feel like drunken invention. Nail a horseshoe to the mast to ward off storms. Pour the first cup of water back into the sea so it won't thirst for you. Wear one sock inside out for luck. But when you ask why, you get the same answer. Because it's always been done. That's the spine of shipboard belief, older than any flag or captain's log. The ocean was here before you, and it will be here after you, and every wave is just the surface of something deeper. You keep it placated however you can. The faiths mingle in strange ways. A man will cross himself before climbing the rigging, then spit 3 times to avert the gaze of a jealous spirit. Another will tack a scrap of parchment with a psalm onto his bunk while wearing a pagan charm around his neck. They pray to saints in the morning and mutter to the wind in the dark. Christ might rule on land, but here Neptune still takes his share, and the sailors hedge their bets accordingly. You notice how seriously they keep these customs when things turn ugly. If the wind dies, the deck falls silent, except for the creak of rope. Men avoid eye contact, check their charms, mutter in their own languages. If a storm rolls in, the helmsman touches the carved token lashed to the tiller before he lays a hand on the wood. It's not that they trust the ritual to save them. It's that they don't dare test what happens if they don't. It seeps into you before you realize it. You stop whistling without thinking. You catch yourself touching the same spot on the rail before each watch. You start carrying the little token you swore meant nothing, rubbing it between your fingers when the sea's voice gets too loud. You don't have to believe in these things for them to work on you. Out here, belief isn't a choice. It's just another form of survival. Night watch tastes like old brass and feels like borrowed time. The rest of the ship has sunk into its damp sleep. Snores and muffled coughs rising through the hatch like bubbles from a tar pit, while you lean into the rail and let the dark press its cold cheek against yours. The sea is a black animal breathing slow. No wind to speak of. The rigging hangs slack like tired arms, and the sails sag, heavy as wet laundry. Stars blur where the mast sways, then steady again, a patient pulse. You count them not to keep time, but to keep your mind from sliding off the world's edge. You listen because there's nothing else to do, and because sound carries truths light won't admit. The hull murmurs in its sleep, a old timbered voice leaking through the seams. A fish hits the surface, and the echo knocks once on the belly of the ship. Far aft, the tiller creaks and goes quiet, as if careful not to wake something. Your breath fogs, and the fog hangs instead of blowing away. When the lantern gutters, you shelter it with your palm, and it settles, obedient, a single trembling pupil in all that night. At first, the silhouette is only subtraction, a piece of the dark that refuses to match the dark around it. You're not sure what changed. Maybe a star vanishes and doesn't return. Maybe the horizon develops a shoulder. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's a line where no line should be, a vertical certainty on a horizontal sea. You squint, tilt your head, step left, step right. It remains, a child's drawing of a ship carved out of night. Mast, spar, a bristle of rigging, the faintest suggestion of a bowsprit like a spear laid against the sky. You wait for the wind that would give that shape life. It does not come. Your own sail flutters, defeated, and then droops again. The pennant at the masthead hangs like a tired tongue. Yet out there the stranger's canvas swells, a pale bulge, full as a lung, at the top of a scream. You tell yourself there must be a current pushing it, some trick of air you can't feel on your skin, but the surface around you is glass, and the only ripples are the ones your own hull makes in its slow, reluctant glide. The other ship is moving as if the ocean itself has taken it in hand and is carrying it where it wants. You call softly for the mate, not wanting to say what you see, as if naming it will bring it closer. He comes up from the gloom, yawning thunder and blinking like an owl, and you point without words. He looks, blinks again, and the yawn collapses into a quiet that isn't sleep anymore. Probably a trader riding a breeze we don't have, he mutters, but his voice has misplaced its swagger. He rubs the charm at his throat hard enough to polish it, then tells you to keep a good eye. He does not leave. He plants himself at your shoulder the way men do when they don't want to be alone with their thoughts. The smell arrives before the details do. It moves over the water like a thought you'd rather not think. Sweet at first in that faint, deceitful way of fruit left too long on a shelf. Then sour, then something deeper that settles heavy in the back of your throat. It's rot, yes, but not fresh rot, not fish or bilge or wet wool. This is older, richer, as if a cellar full of candles had guttered into a puddle of tallow and then been forgotten under the floor of a church. You taste iron behind it, and your tongue tries to crawl away from your teeth. The mate swallows. Wind shift, he says to no one, though the pennant still droops, and the lantern flame stands upright, like a soldier who knows better than to move. Now the thing wears more shape. The lines are all wrong if you look too closely, and looking too closely is the first mistake everyone makes. The shrouds angle like broken bones set in haste. The yard sits where a yard should sit, but also not quite. A fraction too high or too low, depending on how the sea lifts you. No bow wave froths at its feet. Its wake is a bruise. You ask yourself where its lanterns are, and then you see one. No, two, pale coins that don't flicker and don't bloom halos. Light without warmth, patient as eyes. Someone else clambers up from below, then another, summoned by a rope of rumor that runs faster than the bell. No one speaks the word you're all thinking. The captain appears last, wrapped in a cloak that eats starlight, jaw set in a line that has argued with years and won more often than it lost. He takes one look and says that what you're seeing is a trick of the night, a ship on a different tack, a story you're telling your own fear. His mouth says it with practice. His hand has slipped to rest on the rail, and the knuckles are white. The smell thickens until the salt air wears it like a shroud. Rats whistle in the hold and go still. Somewhere below, a sleeping man turns and begins to mutter the names he promised never to say. The lantern sputters once, and then burns steady, stubborn as a heartbeat. You stand there in the gulp of the ocean's throat, with the wrong ship growing cleaner against the sky, and the right explanations falling apart in your hands, and the dark between you shortens. It happens gradually, as if your eyes have to earn the right to see them. At first, the other ship is only wood and canvas, a shape carved out of darkness. Then, there are suggestions. Lighter patches along the deck, where shadow should be unbroken, a flicker of movement that might be the sea playing tricks. You tell yourself it's just the light, but then one of the pale smudges straightens and takes the shape of a man, or something shaped like one. They stand scattered along the deck, a sparse handful, unmoving for too long between motions. When they do move, it's wrong. Not the easy sway of men accustomed to the sea, but a hitch, a lurch, as though every joint has to remember what it's for. A figure near the bow turns in a slow, deliberate arc, head following half a breath after the body. Another bends to pick something up and straightens in stages, vertebra by vertebra, the motion so stiff it makes your own spine ache in sympathy. None of them lean into the roll of the deck. None shift their stance to match the swell. It's as if the ship moves beneath them, and they refuse to acknowledge it. There are no voices, no calls to the rigging, no barked orders, no idle shouts across the deck. Even the sound of work is missing. The thump of boots, the scrape of rope, the clatter of block and tackle. All you hear is the slap of those sails, unnervingly full in a dead calm, and the faint groan of timbers that might be carried on the wind, or might be something else entirely. The distance between the two ships isn't far, but it swallows sound in a way that makes you aware of every noise your own vessel makes. The creak of your mast, the shuffle of boots beside you, the involuntary wet click when someone swallows. You realize your hands are gripping the rail harder than they need to, and you're not alone. The mate at your side, a man who once laughed when lightning hit the mainmast, is pressing a thumb hard into the little brass token he wears around his neck. Behind you, someone mutters in a language you don't know, each word the same length, repeated like a bead of prayer. Then you hear the soft chorus of it, the low sound of men crossing themselves, fingers moving quick over foreheads and chests, as though speed might make the blessing stronger. Even the ones who don't kneel in chapel on Sundays are tracing the sign now. The figures aboard the Phantom don't acknowledge you. They don't look your way or raise a hand or alter their glacial pacing. The closest one drifts along the rail with the same stuttering gait, head tilted as though listening to something you can't hear. Its face catches the faintest lick of starlight, and you see the hollows where eyes should be. Not sockets, just absence. A smudge darker than shadow, like the idea of an eye scraped out of the world. Another passes behind the first, too quickly, and for an instant they overlap in a way that doesn't make sense, like one stepped through the other's body without either noticing. The smell is stronger now, curling in over the water until you can taste it. That same cloying rot, the sweetness of decay stretched too thin, threaded with brine and something metallic. Your throat works against it, but the air feels thicker with every breath. You see one of your shipmates glance toward the captain, perhaps hoping for an order to change course, but the captain is stone, eyes fixed ahead, mouth a locked door. His hands are behind his back, but the muscles in his jaw jump with each slow heartbeat. You watch the pale crew until your eyes blur, until you start to wonder if the wrongness in their movements is contagious. A slow dread works into your bones, heavier than the cold. You find yourself waiting for one of them to look at you, not because you want it, but because part of you is certain it will happen. And when it does, the distance between ships won't matter anymore. No one speaks. No one dares to. The only language left on both decks is the sound of those sails, heavy with a wind that does not exist. The living have always been better at killing you than the dead. Long before any phantom sails haunt the horizon, your ship is already its own floating plague house, a perfect little ecosystem for rot and ruin. The air below deck is warm and wet enough to grow things in, and it does. Fungus blooms on the timbers, black and feathery, and the smell of it blends with human breath into a stew that clings to your lungs. You share this air with dozens of men, none of them healthy, all of them shedding whatever illness they've collected from ports and taverns across the world. Every cough is a lottery, and the only prize is catching something worse than what you already have. Plague doesn't arrive with fanfare. One day a man is hauling rope beside you, and the next he's curled in his hammock, shivering so hard it creaks. Buboes swell under his arms and along his neck, angry black knots that smell faintly of metal. The ship's surgeon, a man whose main qualification seems to be that he owns a saw, peers at him, mutters something about bad air, and tells him to pray. There is no treatment worth the name, just rags soaked in vinegar, muttered blessings, and the hope that the patient doesn't die too quickly and start rotting where he lies. If the surgeon does anything more, it's usually to bleed the man with a rusty knife, letting life run out into a wooden bowl that's been rinsed but never cleaned. Then there's scurvy. You thought it was just a story, an old sailor's joke about losing your teeth. It's not funny when it happens in front of you. The gums go first, swelling red and raw until they sag over the teeth like bruised fruit. Then the teeth themselves begin to loosen, and every bite of the hard, salt-packed rations is like chewing gravel. The skin takes on a gray cast, wounds stop healing, and the legs turn to brittle sticks that ache with every swell of the deck. You'd think the cure, fresh fruit, would be simple. But there's none to be had once you've left port, and the only green thing on board is the mold that clings to the bread. Dysentery is worse in some ways, because it doesn't kill as cleanly. When it strikes, it goes through the hold like fire in dry wood. One man starts with cramps, then another, and soon the latrine, a hole cut into a plank over the sea, is never empty. There's no privacy, no dignity, just a line of hollow-eyed sailors waiting their turn to empty themselves into the waves. The surgeon offers boiled water and a bitter powder that tastes like chalk scraped from the devil's doorstep. It does nothing. You learn to step carefully on deck, because a sick man might not make it to the rail in time. And the sea isn't the only thing sloshing underfoot. The crew deals with it the only way they can, by pretending not to notice until the smell forces the truth. Hammocks are stripped when someone dies, the canvas dunked in seawater and hung to dry as if that makes it clean. Rats feed well during these spells, growing bold enough to climb into sleeping men's blankets to steal crumbs from their pockets. You see more fights over clean water than you do over rum, and in the end, neither lasts long enough to matter. The ship's surgeon, always smelling faintly of tar and bad wine, keeps a small chest of remedies. Herbs gone stale months ago, jars of honey so sugared they're solid, strips of dried fish bladder, he swears, will draw out fever. You begin to suspect the chest is more for show than for saving lives. You came aboard fearing storms and pirates, sharp things and deep water, but those at least are quick. Disease is slow, patient, and utterly certain. It doesn't need the drama of a cannon broadside or the poetry of a shipwreck. It works in silence, spreading in handshakes and shared cups, in the cough that rattles through the dark while the rest of the crew tries to sleep. You start counting every rash, every ache, every stitch in your side. You measure your shipmates by the sound of their breathing at night, listening for the ones whose rhythm stumbles. The ghost ship could appear tomorrow and you'd barely notice, because out here, you're already in its company. The crew just doesn't wear pale faces and hollow eyes yet. Not until the sickness finishes its work. Some ships die long before they sink. You've heard the stories whispered in the forecastle, told by men who claim they saw the aftermath with their own eyes. A vessel sighted adrift, sails torn but still hanging, running without a crew to tend them. The wheel unmanned, no smoke from the galley, no answering shout when hailed. The kind of sight that makes a man's mouth go dry, because a ship without hands is wrong in the way a body without breath is wrong. It still exists, but it isn't alive anymore. The endings are always the same, though the diseases differ. Sometimes it's plague, fast, merciless, eating through a crew in days. The men take sick almost together, one after another falling into their hammocks, too weak to rise. At first, the bodies are carried up and given to the sea. There's no ceremony worth the name, just a muttered prayer and a weighted shroud before the waves take them. The splashes start to come too often, and soon the dead outnumber the living. That's when the survivors stop carrying them topside. You imagine it, the stench swelling in the hold, sweet and cloying, riding every shift of the air, the still shapes swinging gently in their hammocks as the ship rocks, skin turning waxy and tight, eyes sinking into dark pools. Rats move boldly in daylight, leaping from beam to beam, their bellies round from meat they were never meant to taste. The surgeon, if there is one left, stops making rounds. The water barrels grow foul, the food spoils, and the men who can still move sit against the walls, staring at nothing, waiting for their own fever to come. There are accounts from the Hanseatic trade routes of ships found drifting into harbor with their decks strewn in quiet. A boarding party would climb over the rail, swords drawn more for the sake of courage than threat, and find no living soul. Only the sound of rigging, groaning, and the low, steady slap of waves against the hull. In some cases, the dead lay where they had fallen, blackened and rigid. In others, the decks were spotless, as though someone had scrubbed them down after the last man died. And no one could say who that someone had been. When the disease is slower, scurvy, dysentery, it steals the crew in fragments. The sick man's duties fall to another, who wears himself out faster, and soon the burden breaks all of them. The ship limps along until it drifts entirely, sails slack, or still holding the ghost of a wind. A current might carry it for weeks, even months, into the path of another vessel. And then it's someone else's problem, or curse. There's a story the older sailors tell in low voices about a carrack found off the coast of Gascony. No crew, no cargo gone, no sign of a fight. Just 32 bodies in varying states of decay, some lying side by side as if sleeping, others collapsed mid-step. The logbook stopped halfway through a sentence. The lanterns still burned when they boarded, and a pot of stew still steamed in the galley. The boarding party buried the dead at sea, stripped the ship of valuables, and set it alight rather than risk bringing her to port. Even now, they say, on a calm night, you can see her drifting offshore, sails intact, lanterns glowing faintly in the dark. A ghost ship doesn't have to come from the supernatural. Sometimes the ghosts are just the memory of the men who died in the heat and stink, whose bones rolled with the waves long before the hull ever gave way. You start to think that maybe these stories don't need curses or restless spirits. Maybe it's enough for a ship to become a coffin in the middle of nowhere, carrying the silence of its last voyage forever. And maybe that silence is what you really see when you spot one across the water, because a ship can be dead and still keep moving. You don't see it arrive so much as you realize it's already there. One moment the phantom ship is a smear against the horizon, distant enough to pretend it's someone else's problem. The next, it's riding alongside you, its hull a black wall sliding silently through the water, close enough to touch if you leaned too far over the rail. No tacking, no turning, no sign of oars or crew pulling at the wind. Just there, as if the ocean had rolled it forward in a single breath when no one was looking. The sea between the two ships is wrong. It should be churning in the wake, restless with competing currents, but instead it lies flat as poured oil, so still it reflects the masts, like a mirror. Your own bow wave dies at the halfway point, as though the water itself refuses to cross. You lean over the side, squinting into the glassy dark, and see your own pale reflection staring back, warped by the faintest ripple. For a moment you think you see something else there too, another face in the depths, but then the reflection breaks and you tell yourself it was a trick of the starlight. The air changes. Not the wind. There isn't any. But the air itself, as though something has stolen its warmth in a single draw. Your breath comes out in white plumes, each exhale dissolving slow, reluctant to leave your mouth. The damp in your clothes turns icy, the kind of cold that starts in your bones and works outward. Beside you, one of the older hands rubs his arms through his sleeves and mutters a prayer you've already learned to recognize by its cadence. Up close, the ghost ship's sails look wrong. Not just full without wind, but too still, like canvas painted onto the night. They hold their shape perfectly, without the smallest flutter, as if frozen in some moment that doesn't match yours. The hull is streaked with salt in thick, crusted lines that look like scars, and the timbers are blackened in places, as though they've been through fire. Yet there's no smell of smoke, only that thick rot you've come to know. Sweet, heavy, and metallic, like fruit left in blood. It drapes over the water and wraps around you until you can taste it. You can see figures now, pale along the rail, their heads angled down as though they're studying you. They don't move or speak, and even at this distance you can't read their faces. Only the way the dark pools where their eyes should be catch the faint light and hold it too long. One of them lifts a hand, slowly, the motion jerking once midway, and for a moment you think they're going to wave, but the hand just hangs there, fingers curled slightly inward until it lowers again with the same fractured grace. Your shipmates keep their distance from the port rail, though you notice they can't seem to look away. One man crosses himself without breaking his stare, lips moving silently, his fingers clumsy as if they've gone numb. Another spits into the sea, and the spit lands with no splash, just vanishes into that flat strip of water between the ships. You realize no sound comes from the other vessel at all. Not the slap of water against the hull, not the creak of wood, not even the whisper of wind in the rigging. It's not just quiet, it's absence. The captain is on deck now, though you didn't hear him come up. He stands with his hands behind his back, eyes fixed forward, jaw set like a man refusing to answer a question he doesn't want to hear. He doesn't call for a change of course. He doesn't call for anything. His stillness spreads to the rest of you, as if moving might draw the other ship closer, or worse, and make it follow when it leaves. Minutes pass, though you can't say how many. The cold deepens until the boards beneath your feet feel brittle, ready to crack. The distance between the ships doesn't change, not by a hand's span. You find yourself holding your breath without meaning to, as though the air has become too expensive to waste. And then you blink, and the ghost ship is no longer alongside you. It's further off, drifting toward the edge of sight, sails still full in the windless dark. The water between you stirs again, the cold loosens its grip, and your breath fogs less with each exhale. No one speaks, no one needs to, because whatever you just saw didn't arrive in any way you understand, and it didn't leave in one either. You don't see them cross the gap. One moment your deck is your deck. Tar streaks, coils of rope, boot scuffs you recognize like handwriting. And the next, there are strangers standing where no boat or plank ever touched. It's as if the night shook itself, and the extra shadows stayed behind. They're close enough to touch, but touching is a thought that never survives the air between you. The first is by the mainmast, head bowed like a penitent. The second leans against the rail, as if he has always belonged there. A third stands half in the hatchway, so the ladder climbs straight through him, and doesn't mind. Their clothes are an archive of centuries, stitched together by rot. You see the ghost of a velvet doublet beneath a crust of salt, the rags of a sailor's jerkin hardened into armor by time, a collar that might once have been lace now chewed into a frill of fungus. Sleeves hang in ribbons and stiffen as if starched with frost, yet when the wind refuses to move, the tatters drift on their own. The colors are wrong even where you can name them, as if the pigments learned the word drowned and never recovered. A man passes near enough for you to see the pattern of his weave, and you realize the thread has been gnawed by something that lives only in damp silence. Ropes trail from their arms like leashes someone forgot to cut. The strands are swollen, pocked with blisters of rot that pulse slightly when the ship lifts, as if they remember being alive. Some cords loop around their wrists and curl back toward the scuppers like obedient pets. Others wrap torsos and vanish beneath coats, then reappear from hems. Frayed ends, weeping pitch. One has a length of hawser slung across his shoulders like a penitent's scourge. Pieces of it fuse to his jacket, where tar met cloth, and decided they would grow old together. A coil drags behind another across the planks, leaving a dark smear that reflects no lantern light. You cannot tell whether the rope is holding them up or holding them down. They don't move like men. That truth arrives slowly, the way cold seeps through wool. It's in the pauses too long between steps, in the way a head turns after the body, in the way a hand rests on the rail and then fails to remember how to let go. Their feet don't quite meet the deck. Sometimes there's a sliver of night beneath their heels, as if they're walking on a tide you can't see. When one raises an arm, the joints protest with a small shiver you feel in your teeth. No breath steams from their mouths. No breath at all. Your crewmates break cleanly into two kinds of men. The first kind goes below so fast they remember how to fly. You hear the thunder of feet on the ladder, curses muffled into prayers, the clatter of a spilled pan that nobody claims. A boy vanishes so completely, you find yourself looking for him in the rigging because he can't have gone into the dark that quickly. The second kind stays, because terror has nailed them to the boards. They stand with hands at their sides like punished schoolboys, eyes wide enough to show the whites even in this light. A few cross themselves, foreheads smudged with dirty fingers, the gesture shaky and repeated, as if it might work on the 10th try if it failed on the first 9. One man clutches his knife so hard the handle squeaks, but when the nearest figure glides past, he only presses his back into the mast and forgets how to breathe. The visitors do not look at you, and they do not look away. Their faces are a lesson in subtraction. Cheeks fallen into hollows, mouths cracked but unbloodied, eye sockets that aren't empty so much as borrowed by something that reflects light badly. Hair clings in wet ropes to skulls that wear the memory of hats. You wait for a grimace, a snarl, any expression that would make them human again for a second. Nothing happens. A jaw opens as if to speak, and then remembers silence and closes. There is no sound of their boots. There is no sound of them at all, only the faint noise of your own ship, complaining about the extra weight the world refuses to acknowledge. Your lantern sputters once and steadies. The stink that came with their ship thickens in the throat. Sweet and sour braided together, until swallowing becomes work. You taste the iron of old nails and the wet fat of tallow candles that died with their wicks drowning. A rat runs across the deck and stops dead within arm's length of the nearest figure, whiskers stiff, then turns and vanishes like a pulled string. The captain stands at the quarterdeck rail, a statue carved to look like a man thinking better of shouting. His lips move once. No sound comes out. The boatswain lifts a hand, as if to summon order, and lowers it again, because order has not been issued for this. Somewhere below, someone is sobbing as quietly as he can, and from the forecastle there's a slow, steady knocking like a prayer that found a hammer. One of the figures at last makes a decision you can notice. He reaches toward the belaying pin you used earlier, fingers coming down on wood with all the ceremony of a blessing. The rope cinched there loosens an inch and stops, not because of hands or knots, but because the ship decides it will not give any more. The figure tilts his head, listening to a verdict only he can hear, and his rope shadow shivers along the deck like a waking snake. Later, if there is a later, you'll try to recall who moved first, who fled, who froze, who reached for a blade he didn't use. In the moment, there is only the fact that they are here. Not crossing, not climbing, not boarding in any way that fits the words you know. Just here, as if the night had debts to settle and chose your deck to do its accounts. Long before you saw the pale hull sliding through the dark, you'd heard the stories. Every sailor has, whether he admits it or not. They pass from mouth to ear in the forecastle, carried in rum breath and the hiss of the sea against the hull. The names change with the tongue that speaks them, but the bones of the tales are the same. Ships that should be rotting on the seafloor, still sailing. Crews that should be bones in the deep, still walking the deck. The Flying Dutchman is the one you hear most often these days, though it's not the oldest. A captain cursed to sail forever for swearing at God or striking a bargain with the devil. No one can agree which. Some say he defied a storm that no man could survive, lashed himself to the helm, and now roams the seas until the last judgment. Others claim he's a messenger of death, that any ship spotting his tattered sails will meet disaster before the next moonrise. You've heard versions where his crew are shadows without faces, others where they're skeletons that grin through the gaps in their jaws. Once, an old Breton told you the Dutchman's hull was carved from the wood of gallows, and the knots in the planks still whisper the names of the condemned. Further south, they talk of the Caliuch, a phantom from the cold waters off Chile's coast. In those tales, the ship isn't a warning, it's a thief. The Caliuche appears on moonlit nights, beautiful and bright, its decks alive with music and dancing. Sailors who see it are drawn in, thinking they've found rescue, or at least a celebration worth joining. But the music belongs to the drowned, and the crew are the souls of fishermen taken by the sea. Step aboard, and you become one of them, your life traded for an eternity in their revelry. The cruelest part, they say, is that the Caliuch's captives are allowed to visit their families once a year, appearing only as shadows or voices in dreams, unable to touch the world they left. Then there's the Palatine light, from far-off Block Island, though some swear they've seen its glow on other shores. A passenger ship wrecked in the winter, her survivors turned away or left to freeze, depending on who's telling it. Now her ghost burns red on the horizon, a flicker that grows into a blaze, her timbers eternally aflame. Fishermen claim the light comes when storms are near, warning them home, while others say it's the ship's revenge, luring the greedy and the cruel into the same fate she met. What makes these stories survive isn't ink or paper. It's the way the sea makes men talk. In the medieval world, there were no broadsheets to spread these tales, no printed warnings to post at the docks. Word traveled in the holds of merchant ships and the bellies of war galleys, in the gossip of fishermen gutting their catch beside the quay. A man might hear of the Flying Dutchman in a Breton port, then repeat it in Lisbon, changing the details to suit the wind or the mood of the tavern. A legend could cross oceans in the mouths of sailors faster than any letter could reach by land. Sailors carried these stories the way they carried charms or knives, not just as entertainment, but as tools. A warning about storms could be wrapped in a ghost story and remembered long after the chart had faded. A tale of a cursed ship might keep a green hand from sleeping through his watch. And some stories, the ones told only in whispers when the night was still, felt less like warnings and more like preparations. Not for what might happen, but for what already had, somewhere, to someone. You learned quickly that on the water, history and myth are not separate things. The sea doesn't keep records, but it remembers. Every shipwreck leaves an echo, and every sailor who vanishes becomes part of someone else's voyage. The names, Dutchman, Caliucci, Palatine, are just the ones that survived the telling. For every legend you've heard, there are a dozen more that sank with the last man who knew the words. And when a shape rises out of the dark with no wind in its sails and no sound on its deck, you don't ask which story it belongs to. You only hope it isn't about to make you part of the next one. The sea has its own laws, and men have always tried to write them down, as if ink and parchment could tame water. In the medieval world, maritime law was a tangled rope of custom, royal decree, and whatever precedent the last port magistrate felt like citing. One thing was certain: a ship found drifting without a crew was a prize. Salvage rights meant that if you brought her in, you could claim her cargo, her hull, even her timbers. In theory, it was a windfall. In practice, it was a coin flipped by a devil you couldn't see. Sailors knew the risks long before the law tried to define them. A derelict could be the husk of a plague ship, her hold still warm with fever, and her bedding crawling with fleas fat from the last man who died aboard. The moment you set foot on her deck, you took her sickness into your lungs, your skin, your marrow. Sometimes, you'd make it back to port before the symptoms showed. Sometimes you'd bring the infection with you, and the first sign anyone had was when the dockside tavern grew quiet and the gravediggers started working by moonlight. Cargo was no safer. The stories ran wild. Bolts of silk that burned the hands of those who touched them. Casks of wine that smelled sweet until poured, then reeked like opened graves. Coins minted in far-off lands that seemed to disappear from their purses when the moon was full. Men swore they'd heard gold whisper in the night, calling them down into the hold until they woke, standing ankle-deep in shadows they couldn't explain. In the market, cursed goods changed hands like any other, sometimes knowingly, more often not, and their true cost was paid somewhere far from the place of sale. Even the law could not keep its footing when the supernatural touched a ship. What do you write in a ledger when the prize you've towed into harbor vanishes before dawn? What claim can you make when the crew you brought to testify with you no longer remembers the voyage? There are records, fragmentary, but there, of disputes over phantom property, a Venetian galley that swore she took a Genoese merchantman as prize, but when called to account, could produce neither ship nor cargo, only a crew unwilling to speak. A French court that tried to auction a captured hulk and found her buyers fled before bidding began, pale and swearing they'd seen the figure of a woman on her deck, standing still in the midday sun. Some ports tried to ban the taking of derelicts entirely, passing laws that said such vessels were God's judgment and not for men to profit from. Others went the opposite way, offering rich rewards for anyone who brought one in, thinking themselves above the old fears. The results were often the same: ships brought in under tow, then abandoned at anchor when the salvagers sickened, disappeared, or, in some cases, simply walked off the pier one night and did not resurface. Sailors have long memories for these things. Even the greenest hand can tell you that a derelict spotted in calm seas is a gift best refused. They'll mutter about the Black Gull, found with her hold full of spice and her deck salted clean of blood. 3 men boarded to bring her in, and only one made landfall, raving about hands reaching from the shadows. Or the Sainte Marguerite, laden with silver ingots, which sat at anchor outside Marseille for a week while no one dared row out to her. The coins that did make it ashore, pocketed by the bold or the desperate, were said to bring dreams of drowning, so vivid, the sleepers woke coughing brine. You might think greed could quiet such stories, but greed knows fear when it stares across still water at a ship with no flag and no movement, and feels the cold settle in its bones. The law may say you have the right to take her, to strip her clean and sell what you find. But out here, the sea writes the final verdict. And when the property in question belongs to something that isn't quite dead, the ruling has already been made. It reaches you before you see anything. A ripple in the air, subtle at first, like the way a tavern smells when the night's beer has gone stale. Then it thickens, turning the back of your tongue bitter, coating your teeth with something you can't swallow away. You glance at the men nearest you and see the same twitch of their noses, the same brief wince. The smell is still just a suggestion, but it's coming closer. When it arrives, it does so all at once, like someone tore open a rotten cask and let the contents pour over the deck. It's the reek of fish left in the sun too long. The oil in their bellies turned to a sour, metallic sludge. It's the sharp, damp tang of bilge water, trapped below and heated in its own darkness until it's almost a living thing. And under that, heavier than both, is the smell that needs no name. Flesh that has given itself back to the world. Your body reacts before you have time to understand. A tightening in the gut, the quick upward surge that burns your throat. You swallow against it, and the taste only sharpens, as if you've just bitten into the smell. The man beside you doubles over, coughing wetly into his sleeve, and another turns away to retch over the rail. The sound of it makes the smell worse, as if each gag draws it deeper into the air. It clings, sticky and cold, settling into the folds of your clothes and the roots of your hair. You know it will stay there long after the wind returns. You'll be eating weeks from now and catch a faint trace of it rising from your hands no matter how many times you've scrubbed them raw. It's in your breath now, your lungs working like bellows to pull in what they can't refuse. You feel it lining your ribs, seeping into you the way seawater seeps into wood. The stench isn't constant. It surges, swells, and recedes. With each wave of it, you think it can't possibly get stronger, and then it does. There's a depth to it, as if the rot comes in layers. First, the surface note, almost bearable, the odor of spoiled rations or a fishmonger's stall after closing. Then the second layer, deeper, wetter, the sour heat of damp wood and the musk of mildew. And finally, the bottom layer, the one that sits in your chest like a swallowed stone. The sweet, cloying perfume of decay, too ripe to belong to anything that still breathes. Men try to mask it instinctively. A cloth over the face, a gulp from a flask, a twist of tarred rope held beneath the nose. None of it works. The smell slides through wool and linen as if they're not there, mixes with the liquor until the burn on your tongue carries it deeper. The tar helps for a breath or two, but then the smell becomes part of the tar, and now you can't bear the rope either. Someone mutters that the ghost ship has opened her holds, that the stink is the air from below deck spilling into the night. You picture it without meaning to. The darkness inside, crowded with shapes slumped against the hull, their skin loose and waxy, the water in the bilge sloshing against them with every tilt of the ship, the ropes trailing from their arms soaking in it, the sails above catching no wind but still full, the smell rising like heat from a fire you can't see. The dizziness comes next. It's not from hunger or the rocking of the deck. You know those feelings too well to mistake them. This is heavier, the kind that bends the edges of your vision until the lines of the masts blur and shift. Your knees soften under you, and for a moment, you think you might join the others at the rail. You grip the nearest bit of rigging until the dizziness passes, but the smell stays. It owns the air now. By the time you see the source, when the shadow of the ghost ship moves close enough that its deck is just a smear above the waterline, you already know the smell won't leave you. It's carved itself into you the way salt eats iron. Even if you survive whatever comes next, you'll carry it. And someday, when the same stench rises on a different sea, you'll know exactly what's coming before you see it. It begins with something you almost mistake for the wind, a thin, wavering note drifting across the water and curling into your ear so faintly you're not sure it's real. Then it swells, catching on some invisible current, and you hear the shape of it, human, or close enough. It's singing, though not in any language you know. The syllables are stretched until they sound more like breath than words, each one slipping into the next, so you can't tell where the song begins or ends. At sea, sound travels differently. You've known that since your first voyage, when you heard a man cough on another ship half a mile off, clear as if he were standing behind you. The water doesn't just carry sound. It sharpens it, polishes it, until it cuts through the air clean. That's why you can hear the groan of a hull under strain, or the splash of a distant oar, long before you see anything. And it's why the voice now feels close enough to touch, even though you can see nothing but black water between you and its source. The singing is joined by something else. Metal, moving against metal. A dull clank, followed by a smaller scrape, again and again, steady as a heartbeat. Chains. You've heard plenty of them on ships before, but never like this. This sound has no weight to it, no thud of iron dropping on wood or deck. It's hollow, like the chains themselves are made of the echo of chains. The rhythm doesn't match the swell of the sea either. It's too deliberate, as if someone is walking with them wrapped around their wrists, each step perfectly placed in time with the song. Someone near you whispers a prayer. You don't see who it is, but you recognize the tone. Low, urgent, not meant for human ears. The strange part is that you hear it as clearly as the singing and the chains, though the man's lips can't be more than an inch from the wood of the rail. At sea, distance plays tricks like that. A voice on the far side of the deck can sound like it's right beside you, while someone standing close might as well be speaking from inside a storm. The ocean decides what you hear and when, and tonight it has chosen to give you every sound you wish you could refuse. You close your eyes for a moment, and the sounds draw sharper. The singing curls in your ear like smoke, now joined by a faint harmony you didn't notice before, as if more voices have joined in. The chains follow, sometimes in step, sometimes dragging behind. You can hear the rasp of links catching against the deck, the sudden lift as they're hauled up, and the metallic sigh when they fall again. The prayer stays beneath it all, steady, repeating the same line over and over, the words lost to the windless air. The strange thing is how the sounds don't seem to move. On land, you'd expect them to grow louder or fade as their source drew near or slipped away. Here, they remain fixed in the same spot, as if you've sailed into a place where they've always existed, waiting for you. Sometimes they swell, not from distance, but from the way the water bends them, focusing them in a single moment before letting them drift. It's the kind of effect that has been turning sailors' spines cold for centuries. You've heard tales of men who swore they heard voices calling their names over the waves, only to find no one else aboard had heard a thing. When you open your eyes again, the horizon hasn't changed, but you feel closer to something. The song is under your skin now, threading itself through the beat of your blood. The chains have become a metronome, marking time until something unseen decides to arrive. The prayer has grown ragged, the words breaking apart, but the rhythm remains, a pulse to match your own. You understand, then, how legends are born, not from lies, but from moments like this, when the sea carries you into sounds that have no visible source, that settle into the air as if they've been waiting for years to be heard. Men bring these moments back to port, trying to wrap them in words that never fit, and the stories grow until they're as vast and strange as the water itself. The singing fades first, the chains following a breath later. The prayer stops last, cut off mid-phrase. The silence that follows isn't relief, it's a pause, like the world holding its breath, waiting for the next sound to choose you. The smell hits you before you even step below. Not the sharp rot of bodies, that's its own category, but the sour, oily stink of food that's gone too far to name. It drifts up from the hatch like something alive, curling around your face, clinging to your tongue. You hesitate at the ladder, your stomach already turning, but curiosity or duty pushes you down into the dim. Even on a living ship, food is a grim affair. Bread comes hard and full of uninvited guests. Maggots that chew slow tunnels through the crust. Weevils that scatter when you break it. Salted meat is no better. The salt is meant to keep death out, but it only slows the rot, sealing it inside like a secret. You can scrape off the mold, cut away the grayest parts, and call it good enough, though good is a word sailors forget after their first month at sea. Water is worse. Casks turn it green, then brown, until each gulp tastes of the barrel's wood and whatever else found a way to grow there. Beer and wine keep longer, but not forever, and by the time you've been gone from port a month, even those smell like they've remembered they were once alive. Now imagine all that left alone for weeks, maybe months, with no one to stir the casks, scrape the mold, or keep the rats from claiming what's left. In the ghost ship's galley, you find a loaf that collapses into dust at your touch, the mold holding its shape like a husk long after the bread beneath has died. Salted beef lies in a heap on the table, its surface cracked like old leather, slicked over with a glistening fat that never cooled. Some of the pieces are hollow in the middle, gnawed through by something that left behind curled, dry droppings. The water casks are swollen, their lids warped from whatever's growing inside. You pry one open and recoil instantly. The liquid inside is no longer water, not in taste, smell, or sight. It's thick, dark, moving slightly as if stirred from within. A layer of scum clings to the rim, pale and rippled like the skin of a corpse left too long in the sun. A single bubble swells beneath it, pops, and releases a puff of gas so foul you have to turn away, choking. There's wine here too, though it's gone cloudy and throws up a sharp, vinegary sting that cuts through even the other smells. In one corner, a half-empty jug lies on its side, its contents spilled across the floor in a sticky patch that has grown a fur of mold the color of ash. Flies crawl lazily over it, their bodies sluggish in the cold. They shouldn't even be alive out here, but somehow they are, as if the ship's rot refuses to let anything truly die. You step deeper into the galley and feel something crunch under your boot. It's not a bone, not from anything large. Anyway, you look down to see a scatter of brittle shells, the remnants of ship's biscuits so infested the insects became its only structure. In one of the bowls on the shelf, the mealworms are still moving. They coil and uncoil sluggishly in the grain dust, pale as the ghost crew above. You wonder if they've been eating all this time, or if, like everything else on this ship, they're caught between living and not. The air here is thicker, heavier than on deck. You breathe it in and feel it settling inside you, the way damp settles in wood, hard to dry out once it's soaked through. On a living voyage, the galley is a place of noise and motion. Knives chopping, water boiling, men cursing over burned porridge. Here there's nothing. No sign anyone ever lifted a ladle or tasted a mouthful. The food lies where it was last touched, as if the hands that set it down never picked it up again. You leave before you have to see the ship's stores of grain or cheese. You already know what you'd find. Wheels softening from the inside, sacks rippling faintly with what's taken root there. You climb back into the open air, gulping it down even though the smell of the ghost ship clings to it. For a moment you think of what it would mean to be stuck here, alive, but without a living crew. This food, this drink, but your only sustenance until it runs out, or you do. You imagine raising a cup of that black water to your lips, because thirst is worse than fear, and you realize something that chills you more than the ghostly silence. This ship didn't need spirits or curses to kill its crew. It only needed time. It doesn't start as anything you'd call strange. A thin haze along the horizon, pale against the black water, the kind of thing you've sailed through 100 times without thinking. But then the haze thickens and lifts, folding itself into a wall that moves with intent. The sea darkens ahead of it, the stars behind it blur, and by the time anyone calls down from the mast, the fog is already crawling over the bow like it's been hunting you for miles. It comes fast. One moment you can see the faint line of the horizon, the next it's gone, swallowed whole. The world shrinks to the length of the deck, the rest of it dissolving into a shifting gray so dense you feel it press against your skin. The air dampens instantly, slicking your hair to your head, turning the wood beneath your boots slick. You taste salt, not from the spray but from the fog itself, as if it's made from the breath of the sea. Every sound changes. Muted, close. Your own movements, louder than they should be. Men speak in low voices, though there's no real reason to whisper, except that the fog makes it feel necessary. The lookout shouts something from the mast, but the words come down blurred, scattered by the damp, and no one's sure if they heard right. Somewhere aft, a rope knocks once against the mast, and then goes still, the sound carrying farther than it should, sharp against the muffled air. Then the rigging begins to crackle. At first it's just a faint hiss, like the sea sliding along the hull. But it grows, a prickling sound that builds until you can feel it in your teeth. You look up and see a pale shimmer racing along the lines, little threads of light skipping from rope to rope, clinging to the mastheads before winking out. Saint Elmo's fire, the old hands say, but you've never seen it like this. Bright, almost white, flickering not just on the tips of the masts, but weaving along the rigging like something alive. You can smell it too, sharp and metallic, the scent of air just before lightning strikes. The helmsman swears and slaps the compass housing. You lean over to look, but you already know what you'll see. The needle spinning without pause, turning the same slow circles, no matter which way the ship leans. It doesn't twitch or waver. It just spins, steady as a mill wheel, refusing to answer the question every man aboard is asking. You don't need the captain's face to tell you he doesn't like it. In this kind of fog, you lose not just sight, but sense. You can't feel the wind, can't see the swell, can't tell if the ship is moving at all, except for the faint groan of the timbers. The water could be glass or a whirlpool, and you'd only know when it decided to take you. The men start glancing upward, watching the fog curl around the masts, slip through the rigging like it belongs there. Someone mutters that it's the same fog that brings the dead their way, that it hides their ships until they're close enough to step across without getting wet. The captain orders the bell rung, the sound deep and lonely in the smothered air. It carries, but not far. It seems to fall into the fog and vanish, swallowed like everything else. The men glance over the rails into the pale, nothing beyond, straining for any shape, any light. The only glow is the faint shimmer on the ropes, now brighter, clinging longer before fading. You half expect it to drip from the rigging like molten metal. You don't know how long it lasts. Minutes or hours. The fog has a way of bending time, turning it into something that stretches until you forget what clear air feels like. The spinning compass never slows. The crackle in the ropes never stops. And all the while, the horizon, that thin line between what you know and what you fear, stays gone. When the fog finally thins, it doesn't lift so much as dissolve, retreating in wisps that vanish before you can track them. The air clears, the stars return, and the needle in the compass settles like nothing ever happened. But you're left with the feeling that something came with the fog and left with it. Something you never saw, but still managed to pass straight through you. It starts with a flicker of lantern light through the fog, low on the ghost ship's deck, spilling out from an open hatch. It isn't the cold, greenish glow you expect from something dead. It's warm, gold, the kind that speaks of hearths and markets and everything a man might spend his life chasing. The first thought you have is that someone lit it, recently. The second thought is that whoever did is no longer using it. From where you stand, you can see past the hatch into the darkness below. The light catches on, shapes stacked just inside, barrels bound with brass hoops, chests with their lids ajar, the dull gleam of metal that could be coins or something better. It's not just a glimpse, it's an invitation. The kind you don't get twice. No one says anything at first. The crew moves like a single animal, shifting closer to the rail, heads craning toward that golden glow. The silence is tight, stretched between want and warning. Then someone breaks it. "Could be worth a year's pay," he says, too loud, as if the words themselves might anchor him to the idea. Another laughs, short and sharp, the kind of laugh men use when they're already picturing their hands on something they shouldn't touch. The arguments begin, quiet at first, then sharper. You hear greed in the voices, real greed, the kind that makes men forget the rules they swore to live by. "If it's just drifting, it's fair salvage," someone says. "Better us than the next ship along." "We've seen no crew, no claim," another adds, and you can almost hear him counting the coins in his head. The men who disagree don't argue with law, they argue with fear. They remind the others of the smell, the way the rigging lit without storm, the spinning compass. "Things don't vanish without reason," one says, his voice low, "and you don't take what the seas decided to keep." The captain listens without stepping in. His eyes aren't on the men or the hatch, but on the fog beyond, scanning it as though he's waiting for something else to arrive. His stillness makes the rest of them restless. One of the younger sailors grips the rail until his knuckles go white, rocking on his heels like he's fighting the urge to leap. You know that look. It's the same one you've seen on gamblers holding a hand they're sure will win, right before it doesn't. Someone swears they saw gold. Real gold, glinting in the corner of the hatch. Another claims the barrels could be full of fresh water, food, wine. They talk about how quickly they could get in and out, how the fog would hide them from whatever else might be watching. They don't talk about the fact that the fog also hides them from the world they'd want to return to. The fear isn't loud, but it's there. You see it in the way the cautious ones keep glancing at the still water between the ships, as if it might rise up and close the gap without warning. They shift their weight like men ready to run. When the wind changes direction for half a heartbeat, carrying that stench across again, those men flinch and step back. You find your eyes returning to the hatch despite yourself. The light sways slightly, maybe from the ship's movement, maybe from something else. Shadows move inside, slow and heavy, like they belong to objects shifting in the swell. Or maybe they don't belong to objects at all. You can't be sure. The captain finally speaks. No one boards. His voice is calm, but final. There's no explanation, no appeal to reason or tradition, no threat. Just the order and the certainty that it won't change. The men stare at him for a beat too long, then look back toward the hatch as if it might vanish while they blink. Greed doesn't leave quickly. It lingers, humming under the skin, whispering that maybe the captain's wrong, that maybe luck will forgive a trespass. And you know it won't take much. A missed watch, a silent rope lowered over the side for one of them to test it. For now, though, the golden light stays where it is, shining just enough to remind you of what waits below. Close enough to touch, far enough to cost you everything. The rope creaks as you lower yourself across the gap, boots dangling over a strip of water so still it looks painted on. You expect the ghost ship to rock under your weight, even just a little, but it doesn't. The hull takes you in with no complaint, no movement, as if it's been waiting. When your boots hit the deck, the sound is wrong. Too sharp, like striking stone, not the hollow thud of wood you've known all your life. The first thing you notice is the temperature. The timbers are cold, Not with the damp chill of night air, but with a deep, steady cold that feels pulled up from somewhere far below. It seeps through the soles of your boots, into your bones, until you feel like you've stepped barefoot into snow. Your breath clouds in front of you, though the air between the ships had been mild. Then there's the silence. No groan of timbers shifting under the swell. No slap of water against the hull. No flutter of canvas or strain of rope. It's not just quiet, it's absent. A hollow space where sound should be, so complete it makes you aware of your own breathing in a way you've never been before. You take a step, and the creak of your boots against the frozen plank sounds like a shout. The deck is slick in places, but not with water. A faint frost clings to the grain, glittering in the dim light. It crunches underfoot, each step leaving behind a perfect outline of your tread before the print fades, the frost pulling itself back together. You run your hand along the rail out of habit, and your fingers come away dry but aching from the cold. Shapes rise out of the dim. Coils of rope left in perfect circles, buckets upright, a mop propped neatly against the mast. It's the kind of tidiness you only see just before a voyage starts, before the first shift of wind turns order into work. But here, it feels like a display. Nothing is out of place, and nothing is in use. You glance toward the main hatch and see it yawning open, a mouth into blackness. No lanterns burn below, no voices call up. You can't even smell the sea here. The air is flat and stale, like the inside of a tomb. That's when you realize what else is missing. There's no sign of life, no scurrying of rats, no gulls perched on the rail, not even the faint hum of insects drawn to whatever rot might be below. It's as though the ship has been emptied of everything that moves, everything that breathes. You step further, and the planks beneath you hum faintly, a vibration you can feel in your knees more than your ears. It might be the sea, if the sea were still capable of touching this place. You stop to listen, but it doesn't fade. It's steady, like the echo of a bell tolling somewhere far away, too low to hear and too constant to stop noticing once you've felt it. Your eyes start playing tricks. The rigging shifts at the edge of your vision, though the air is calm. Shadows flicker along the mast as if something passed between you and the dim light from your own ship. But when you turn, there's nothing there. The deck feels longer than it should, each step stretching the space instead of closing it. The distance to the forecastle seems the same, no matter how many paces you take. Somewhere behind you, one of your crewmates swears softly. The sound is thin, almost swallowed before it reaches you, and it makes the silence settle heavier. You glance back toward your own ship, expecting comfort in its familiar outline, but the fog has thickened between you, smudging its shape until it's only a blur. The rope you crossed on is still there, but now it seems too narrow, too far, as if you've stepped not just onto another ship, but into another place entirely. The cold climbs higher with each breath. Your fingers ache, your jaw tightens against it. You tell yourself it's only weather, only wood and rope like any other vessel you've boarded. But when you press your hand flat against the deck again, the chill bites back, and you realize you could stand here until the bones in your hand felt exactly like the planks beneath you. And in that moment, you understand. This isn't simply a ship you've boarded. You've crossed into something that lefty the hatch yawns wider as you approach, its edges rimed with frost that doesn't melt under your touch. The darkness below is thick, not just an absence of light, but something denser, like smoke that doesn't move. You lower yourself slowly, each rung of the ladder groaning in a way the deck above never did, as if the sound doesn't belong here but is forcing itself into the silence. The cold deepens with every step down. Your breath feels heavier in your chest, your fingers stiff around the wood. The air smells of old iron and something sweeter, faint but unmistakable. The scent of rot that's gone past flesh and into bone. When your boots touch the lower deck, the sound is swallowed instantly. You can hear your own pulse more than the ship. You strike flint to steel, the spark flaring too bright in the dark, then settling into the dull glow of your lantern. The light falls only a few feet ahead, the rest of the corridor receding into shadows that seem to move with the sway of the flame. The walls press close on either side, damp to the touch, the boards slick, as though the cold here condenses into something more than water. The first thing you see is a hand, not attached to anything living, just an arm slumped across a hatch, combing, the sleeve stiff with frost, the skin beneath a gray that's nearly blue. You move the lantern higher and see the rest of him, folded awkwardly against the wall, eyes wide but glassy, lips pulled back from his teeth, as though he'd died mid-curse. His other hand still grips a belaying pin, though whatever fight he thought he was winning is long over. Further in, the bodies multiply. Some are slumped in corners, others sprawled in the middle of the narrow walkway. You count without meaning to, reaching 10 before you lose track in the maze of limbs and shadows. They're not all intact. Some look gnawed, bones exposed in ragged arcs where flesh once was. You expect to hear the scurrying of rats, but the silence holds until you turn a corner. 2 of them sit just at the edge of the light, sleek and black, their eyes reflecting red. They don't move when you see them, don't even flinch at the flare of your lantern. They only watch. One licks its muzzle slowly, the way a man might wipe his mouth after a meal. The other tilts its head as though measuring you, weighing the cost of patience. When you take a step forward, they slip back into the dark without sound, as if the shadows themselves pulled them in. The corridor narrows, forcing you sideways past a stack of barrels. One lies on its side, split open, its contents spilled and frozen mid-spread across the planks. Grain litters the floor, clumped together with something dark. The blood, you think, though the cold has changed its color. A knife lies nearby, the hilt slick and worn from desperate hands. You reach a wider space. Storage, maybe, but it feels more like a grave. The bodies here are different. They're huddled together, backs to the wall, knees drawn to chests, arms locked around each other, faces pressed into collars, as if hiding from something that still might be here. The frost has grown thick over them, veiling their features in a brittle white. It's hard to tell if their eyes are open beneath it. The signs of struggle are everywhere. Splintered boards, broken tools, a smear of something dark running along the wall where a hand must have slid before falling. But it all feels halted. No decay beyond the cold's grip, no movement beyond your own, like the ship took that last moment of terror and sealed it in, preserving it for anyone unlucky enough to wander in later. Somewhere deeper in the dark, you hear a sound. Not the shuffle of rats or the creak of timbers, just one soft breath, drawn slow and deliberate, like someone testing the air. The flame of your lantern shivers. You don't call out. Whatever's down here already knows you're here. He see behind a long time ago. The door to the captain's cabin stands shut, though the frost that's claimed the rest of the ship hasn't touched it. The wood is dark, almost polished, and when you press your palm against it, the cold you've been carrying with you since stepping aboard doesn't bite back. It's warmer here, faintly, like the air on a still day before a storm. You twist the latch. It turns without resistance, though the hinges sigh as if it's been years since anyone asked them to move. Inside, the first thing you see is the candle. It sits at the far end of the cabin on a desk littered with papers, its flame steady and tall. The wax beneath it hasn't run. There's no pool collecting at the base, no drip down the side. Just a perfect column of white, unmarked, as if it's never been lit at all. The flame gives off no heat, though it fills the room with light enough to see everything. The desk is neat in a way the rest of the ship isn't. Charts are stacked in even piles, compass and dividers laid in exact parallel. A logbook lies open, its quill resting across the spine as if set down only a moment ago. The ink on the last entry glistens under the candlelight, the way fresh ink does before it sinks into the page. You lean closer, careful not to smudge it, and read. The handwriting is precise, each letter hooked and sharp, the lines straight even without a ruler. The date is recent. Too recent. Weeks ago, maybe days, depending on how long you've been at sea. The entry itself begins plainly, listing position, wind, and sea state. But halfway down the page, the tone shifts. The lines stagger, the hand growing heavier, the words slipping into fragments. Lights on the horizon, crew uneasy, singing through the fog. The last sentence is a slash of ink across the page, the nib dragged hard enough to tear the parchment. You can't tell if it's a word or just the trace of a hand that lost its purpose. Other books lie closed beside it. You pull one free and open it to find the same hand. Earlier dates, voyages traced in neat, calm detail. They follow the captain's life at sea, years of crossings and storms, each entry ending with a note on the weather and the condition of his crew. In the later pages, the notes grow shorter. More mentions of sightings, ships where no ships should be, changes in the wind that came without warning. Then, abruptly, a single page with nothing but one sentence, repeated over and over in smaller, tighter writing until the letters blur. They are already aboard. You look up from the desk and take in the rest of the cabin. A coat hangs by the door, its buttons fastened, the cloth free of dust or damp. Boots rest neatly beneath it, upright, polished. On the bunk, the blanket is turned down, the pillow slightly indented, as though someone rose from it minutes before you entered. The air smells faintly of salt and ink, but underneath there's something harder to name. A weight in the scent, like the space between lightning and thunder. The candle flame doesn't move, not even when you shift past it. It doesn't bend toward you or away, doesn't flicker with your breath. You pass a hand near it, close enough that the hairs on your skin should feel the heat, but there's nothing, just light, pure, and cold. You glance back at the logbook. The ink on that last torn line still shines. You can almost believe it would smear if you touched it. But the thought of placing your fingers on that page, on the captain's final moment, roots you to the deck. There's no sign of him here, no body, no coat thrown aside in haste. Just his words, his candle, and the feeling that he hasn't gone anywhere at all, only stepped out for a moment, and that any moment now, he might step back in. It starts so subtly you almost think it's your imagination. A faint stirring along your arm, as if a stray thread of your sleeve has shifted in a draft. You glance around the captain's cabin, but the air is still. The candle burns straight, the papers on the desk don't move. You tell yourself it was nothing, that it's just the after effect of the cold you've been walking through since stepping aboard. But then it comes again. This time, it's stronger. A pressure, not from above or below, but from the side, passing along your ribs as though someone just brushed past you in a narrow hall. You turn sharply, expecting to see one of your own crew crowding in behind you, but there's no one. The door is still shut. The space between you and the desk is empty. The cold spreads from that point of contact like spilled ink soaking into cloth. It's not the kind of chill the sea gives you, the kind you can stamp out with movement or warm breath into your hands. This is slower, deeper, the kind that sinks straight into your bones and decides to stay. Your chest tightens against it. The tips of your fingers ache. You move toward the door, and something trails along your back. Not a shove, not a grip, just a glide, soft but deliberate, following the curve of your spine. Your shoulders stiffen, the skin beneath your clothes crawling, and for a heartbeat you think you feel fingers, thin ones, colder than the frost on deck, curling just enough to know they're there before slipping away. The air is wrong now, heavy. You can't hear your own breathing clearly. It feels muffled, as if you're listening to yourself from underwater. The cold in your bones pulses, rising and falling in waves that leave your stomach lurching. You've been chilled before on the open sea. Nights when the wind cut so deep, it felt like you'd never be warm again. But this is different. This feels like a sickness taking root, working from the inside out. You stand still, trying to steady yourself, but that only makes it worse. You can feel it moving, not in the air around you, but in the space inside your skin, like someone is pacing the length of your nerves. The fine hairs on your arms rise, your neck prickles, and you have the sick certainty that if you turned at exactly the right speed, you'd catch sight of something just leaving your vision. From somewhere behind you, faint but close, there's the sensation of breath. Not warm, not even particularly human, just a pressure in the air near your ear, enough to make you step away without thinking. Your heel catches on the deck, and for a moment your balance tilts toward the candle, but it doesn't flicker. It doesn't notice. You tell yourself to keep moving, back out the door, back across the deck, away from this room. But with every step, you feel the brush again, on your arm, at your side, across your back. Not following in your footsteps so much as staying beside you, keeping pace. The cold sharpens, a line drawn from your shoulder down into your chest, and with it comes a weight, a kind of pressure that makes your lungs work harder to pull in air. By the time you reach the ladder, your teeth are clenched against a tremor you can't stop. You grip the rail, but your fingers don't feel the wood. They feel only the echo of that cold, clinging to your skin like a second set of hands. You glance down, half expecting to see frost where you've touched, but there's nothing. Just you, your own hands, and the impression of something that refuses to leave. You climb up into the gray light above, but the feeling doesn't fade. The deck looks the same, the air tastes the same, yet the cold stays in you, too deep for the sun or the wind to reach. You know it will be hours before your body forgets the shape of that unseen touch. If it forgets at all, the talk starts in low voices, almost embarrassed, the way men speak about something they don't want to admit they believe. It's the older ones first. Those who've seen storms break without reason and men vanish over calm seas. And before long, it spreads. By the time you've heard it, the idea's already grown legs. The ghost ship needs cleansing, or you'll never make it home. It's not a new notion. Long before compasses and sextants, before maps could promise more than a guess, sailors kept their faith in things that couldn't be nailed to a mast. A ship that went wrong could be righted again, but not with rope or carpentry. You needed a bell, rung loud enough to scatter whatever shadows had nested in the rigging. You needed holy water, thrown across the deck in wide arcs, so the salt in the wood would remember it once belonged to the sea, not the dead. You needed a relic, bone, or cloth, or splinter, that had touched a saint, tucked under the mast so no cursed wind could fill the sails. Some swore by smoke. They'd burn rosemary or frankincense in the galley, letting the scent curl through the hatches and crawl up the companionways until every corner breathed it in. Others trusted only iron, driven into the mast or nailed into the keel, to keep the restless from crossing the planks. More than one captain kept a Bible lashed under his bunk, pages wrapped in oilcloth so no water or hand could turn them. There were real cases. Stories passed from mouth to mouth, half remembered, but believed all the same. A carrack out of Lisbon in the 1000, 300s that returned with only 5 men, the others taken by sickness or something worse. The survivors claimed they'd seen the masts glow with blue fire at night, the sails ripple without wind. A priest had been brought aboard when they limped into port. He'd walked the deck barefoot, ringing a handbell and chanting in Latin, his voice carrying over the water as if the sea itself was listening. They said he'd poured wine at the bow, water at the stern, and the glow had vanished. Or the French ship that took on a Dominican friar for a voyage through the Channel, after rumors of a pale figure pacing its deck spread from crew to crew. The friar brought nothing but a satchel of salt, a silver crucifix, and a small jar of what he called blessed oil. He anointed the mast, touched the crucifix to every hatch, and threw the salt into the sea in 3 precise handfuls. The figure was never seen again, though the men claimed the smell of oil lingered for weeks, no matter how hard the wind blew. Of course, there were other endings too. A ship out of Bergen, cleansed 3 times by 2 different priests, still drifted into port, unmanned, sails tattered, the bell swinging slow in a wind no one else felt. People said some curses couldn't be lifted, that they were sewn into the timbers the moment the keel touched water. Others said the priests had been frauds, landmen who didn't understand the kind of faith the sea demanded. Now, standing on the ghost ship's deck, you can feel the weight of those old rituals pressing in. You imagine a priest here, robes whipping in the wind, arm raised to scatter droplets of water that might never land. You picture the bell ringing into this dead calm, its sound falling flat against the silence. It's hard to believe anything could push back what's taken hold here. Harder still to picture it letting go. One of your crewmates mutters about fetching the relic kept in your own ship's hold, a splinter of wood said to come from the true cross, wrapped in linen and locked away since the voyage began. Someone else scoffs, says there's no point bringing something holy into a place that's already swallowed the holy whole. The argument rises and falls, but no one moves to fetch it. You realize the truth is simpler than either side admits. Bells, relics, water. They're not for the ship. They're for the men, to remind them they're still part of the living world, that the wind still listens, that the sea can still carry them home. On this deck, in this air, you're not sure any of that is still true. It begins the way all sicknesses do at sea, with a heaviness you can't quite name. Your head feels thick, your stomach uneasy, but you tell yourself it's the cold, or the smell of the place, or the fact that you've been holding your breath more than breathing. You've been on bad ships before. You've felt worse. But as the hours pass, the weight in you grows, pressing against your ribs, coiling low in your gut, until every movement feels like wading through tar. The nausea comes next, rolling over you in slow, deliberate waves. It's not like seasickness, that quick relief when you look at the horizon or lose your last meal. This is deeper, as though something has rewired the inside of you to reject itself. Your mouth tastes of metal, sharp and bitter, and you swallow against it without thinking, only to find it waiting again seconds later. The air feels different now too. Thicker, almost greasy, clinging to your throat when you breathe. By the time you notice the shadows moving, you've already stopped trusting your eyes. At first, it's just a flicker, a suggestion that someone stepped into your peripheral vision. You turn, expecting a crewmate, but there's nothing there. Later, the shapes take on more detail, the curve of a shoulder, the tilt of a head, the trailing edge of a coat. They're always just far enough that you can't see their faces, and always gone when you try to focus. When night comes, you think you might get some relief in sleep, but the dreams are worse. They aren't even dreams, not in the way you're used to. There's no story, no sense of place, just flashes of sensation. The slam of a hatch in pitch darkness, the sound of something wet dragging across the deck. Breath against your ear, cold and steady. You wake up with your heart hammering, the shape of the last sound still in your head, and the taste of seawater in your mouth. The others aren't faring better. One man swears he felt the deck shift beneath his feet, though the sea was flat as glass. Another vomits into the scuppers and says he saw a face in it, eyes wide, mouth open, as if screaming. No one laughs at him. They're all too busy keeping their own stories quiet. But you can see it in their eyes, the same strain, the same fatigue, the same unspoken suspicion that whatever's happening isn't entirely in the body. You try to tell yourself it could be plague, or poison in the barrels, or some bad meat that's working its way through you. At least those things you can name. Fight, even if the fight ends badly. But there's no fever, no rash, no swelling. Just that constant press inside your chest, and the way your thoughts keep slipping, losing their edges. Sometimes you forget what you were saying mid-sentence. Sometimes you're sure you've seen a man standing right beside you, only to find you're alone. The light doesn't help. In the day it feels too dim, like the sun can't quite reach this place. At night it's too bright. The lantern flames sharp and thin, throwing shadows that move wrong across the deck. You start avoiding the rail because every time you look into the water, you see shapes rising toward you, their outlines trembling just before they break the surface. They never do, but you know they could. By the second night, you stop being able to tell whether you're asleep or awake. You'll be walking the deck, sure of it, only to blink and find yourself lying in your hammock with the cold of the ghost ship still under your skin. You'll wake from a dream convinced you've been speaking to someone, the conversation fading even as you try to hold on to it. You start to wonder if they're dreams at all, or if you've begun living somewhere between the two states, caught in the space the ghost ship keeps for its guests. Whatever it is, plague, poison, or something older, you know it's already in you, and there's no throwing it overboard. The first time you try to leave, it feels almost too easy. You cross the deck with your eyes fixed on your own ship, that reassuring outline waiting through the fog. The rope you'd strung between the two vessels is still there, swaying gently in the still air. You grip it, put a boot on the rail, and step forward. That's when the fibers give way beneath your hands. It's not the slow fraying of age. It's sudden, violent, like the rope has been struck from within. The strands whip into the water, vanishing in an instant. You stare at the empty space between the ships, the distance seeming wider now than when you first crossed. The sea below is still at first, unnervingly flat, but the longer you look, the more you notice small movements, ripples that have no source, eddies that turn against each other. You tell yourself you'll find another way. The second attempt comes with the gangplank. You and two others wrestle it into place, its weight solid beneath your hands. The moment it touches the opposite rail, a sound splits the air, a deep, splintering crack that runs the length of the wood. In seconds, the plank sags in the middle, its heart eaten away by rot that wasn't there moments before. The ends crumble, spilling the whole thing into the water where it drifts for only a breath before sinking straight down, too fast for something made of timber. The sea starts changing after that. It moves in ways you can't chart or name. The water between the ships swells without wind, dark green ridges rising and falling as though something massive is passing beneath. The surface churns in circles, not quick enough to capsize, but enough to make you step back from the edge, unsure if the pull you feel at your feet is from the swell or from something else entirely. When you try to shout across, your voice doesn't carry. The fog swallows it whole. You can see movement on your own deck, figures leaning over the rail, shapes you think you recognize, but no sound reaches you. Their mouths move, their hands wave, and you can't tell if they're urging you to hurry or warning you to stay where you are. Someone suggests swimming. You all look down at the water, and the idea dies before it's spoken aloud again. It's not the distance, it's what you see beneath it. Shadows too large to be fish drift lazily in the depths, holding their shape for a moment too long before fading into the green. Once, a pale form rolls just under the surface, the shape of a human arm stretching toward the light before dissolving into foam. The ship feels smaller with every failed attempt. The fog presses closer, the deckboards under your boots colder. The rail where the rope had been tied is wet now, though no spray touches it. You keep glancing at the place where your ship should be, but each time the view shifts. The masts blur, the sails vanish, the hull seems to turn away, and you're left staring into open water. The others begin pacing, their movements jerky, muttering about finding another line, another plank, another way. But you've started to understand the truth they won't say aloud. The ship isn't simply holding you. It's adjusting to you. Every idea, every path, every scrap of hope you reach for, it's already closing off. When you lean over the rail one last time, you can't even see your vessel anymore. Just the water, circling slow, drawing you in. And you realize that if you tried to jump, you wouldn't fall into the sea at all. You'd fall into the ship itself. You wake to a strange kind of quiet, not the oppressive, unnatural silence of the ghost ship itself, but the thinner kind that comes after a storm has passed, when the air feels lighter, but only because it's been scraped clean. You climb out of your hammock expecting to see that pale hull looming alongside, but when you reach the rail, there's nothing. Just an expanse of dull green water and a horizon choked with fog. For a moment, you think maybe it's still there, hidden, waiting for you to notice it again. You lean forward, scanning for the faint cut of its masts, the shadow of its sails. Nothing moves but the slow roll of the swell. The ghost ship is gone. You almost believe you've imagined it. The cold under your skin, the strange dreams, the hours below deck, staring at faces frozen in time. It all feels too heavy to have been real. You glance at the others, looking for that same dawning relief, but their expressions are wrong. Too flat, too tired. The kind of faces people wear when they've decided to stop talking about something. It's then you notice who isn't here. The deck feels roomier, the space between you and the nearest man wider than it should be. You start counting heads without meaning to, running through the faces you've known since before this voyage began. You come up short by 3. No one says the names. They don't have to. You know them. Men who were there the night before, who crossed with you, who whispered about leaving when the rope still held. Men who took shifts on the deck, who stood beside you watching the candle burn in the captain's cabin. Gone. You ask where they are, because someone has to. A few glances pass between the crew, quick and sharp, before someone mutters they didn't make it back. No explanation, no details, just those words, as if the space between the two ships had been a battlefield and you'd all agreed not to speak of the dead. You press again, but the answers turn softer, mumbled into collars, until even that stops. The work of the morning begins, but it's slower than usual. No one whistles, no one calls out orders, and when the wind shifts, no one curses at the change. Every sound feels deliberate, controlled, as though you're all afraid to draw too much attention from something that might still be listening. You keep looking at the water, certain you'll catch sight of that pale deck again, but it's only the sea, patient and wide. One of the younger men passes close to you while coiling rope. Under his breath, so low you almost miss it, he says, "They never leave empty." His eyes don't meet yours, and he keeps walking before you can ask what he means. You think about the cold you still carry, the way it's settled in your bones like a passenger, and you wonder if he's wrong. Maybe they do leave empty. Maybe they just take something you don't notice right away. By midday, the fog thickens, and the horizon disappears completely. The ghost ship might be a mile away or 100. It might be gone forever. You don't know which possibility you fear more. You glance at the men still here, watching the way they avoid each other's eyes, how they keep their hands busy, even when there's no task left. It's not just the missing they're afraid of. It's the idea that it could have been them, and maybe still will be. When night comes, you listen to the water against the hull and wonder if, somewhere out there in the dark, the ship is listening too. And if it is, whether it already knows who it will take next. The shoreline should feel like a blessing, but it doesn't. You stand on the dock with the boards solid under your boots and the smell of wood smoke drifting from the harbor, and all you can think is how wrong it feels to be here. The air is warmer, the colors brighter, but the weight you've been carrying hasn't lifted. It clings to you the way damp clothes do. Heavy, persistent, unwilling to let go. The others step off the gangplank in silence. There's no cheer, no relief in their faces, just a blankness that looks too much like the stillness you saw in the dead on that other deck. A few families wait, waving from the crowd, but their smiles falter when they see you. They step back without meaning to, their eyes shifting from you to the men beside you and then away entirely. You can't blame them. You know what you smell like. It's not just salt or sweat from the weeks at sea. It's deeper. A sour rot that soap won't touch. You've scrubbed until your skin burned, soaked in hot water until you thought you'd boil yourself clean, but the scent rises again as soon as the air dries you. It's the smell of the bilge, of wet rope left too long, of something that's been under the water and shouldn't have come back up. The taverns are different now. You find a place at a table, but the men you used to drink with avoid your eyes. If they speak to you at all, it's in short phrases, nothing that invites you to stay. Some of them leave coins on the table before they go, as though paying you off for your silence. Others just cross themselves when they think you aren't looking. You hear the whispers anyway, not loud enough to challenge you, but steady. That you brought something back with you, that you were seen talking to yourself on deck when no one else was near, that the clothes you wore that night still hang damp in your sea chest. No matter how dry the air, sleep doesn't help. The dreams are worse on land. The motion of the ship follows you into the dark, and you wake swearing you hear water slapping against the hull. Sometimes, you smell it too. Salt and fish, and that same deep rot, heavy enough to turn your stomach. You keep a candle burning in your room, but you've started to notice it doesn't throw shadows the way it should. You tell yourself you survived, that you made it back when others didn't. But survival feels too much like theft. You stole your place back in the living world, and you're not sure what you gave in exchange. Faces follow you. Men you saw last alive on your own deck. Men you left behind on another. You can still see the way their mouths moved when they shouted across the gap, even if you couldn't hear the words. There's a part of you that wishes the ghost ship had taken you. Not because you want to die, but because you understand now that the ones it leaves behind aren't really spared. You walk through the market, hear the gulls cry, feel the sun on your face, and none of it reaches you. You carry the cold inside, the same cold that brushed your skin in the captain's cabin, the same cold you felt watching the water churn between the ships. Months from now, you might take another voyage. You'll tell yourself it's for work, or for money, but you'll know the truth. You'll be looking for it again, for the pale sails that move without wind, for the still water that closes you in, for the moment when you can stop pretending you ever really came back, because you didn't. Not all of you. It never takes long for a voyage like yours to turn into something else entirely. By the time the first telling reaches the next port over, the facts have already bent. You hear about it one night in a tavern 2 towns away, sitting in the corner with your hood low. The man at the center table says it wasn't just a ghost ship. It was a demon's ark, crewed by the souls of drowned captains who lure the living to their deaths. He speaks with the authority of someone who's never been anywhere near it, and the men around him hang on every word. You'd correct him if you thought it mattered, but you know the truth doesn't survive long at sea. The ocean takes whatever it wants, and that includes the shape of the stories people tell about it. By the 3rd retelling, you'll hear that the ship's sails were made from human skin. By the 5th, the survivors, fewer and fewer each time, only escaped because they cut out their own tongues, so the ghosts couldn't find them in the dark. The details change, but the core never does. A ship appears where no ship should be. Its crew doesn't breathe. Its sails don't move with the wind. And anyone who boards it comes back wrong, if they come back at all. That part the sailors believe. You see it in the way they go quiet when someone mentions pale sails or calm seas in the wrong place. In the way their eyes dart to the horizon as if expecting to see it there, waiting. The tales spill into caution. New hands are warned never to answer a hail from an unknown vessel at night. Fishermen mutter about throwing back the first catch of the day if a fog moves in too fast. Old men at the docks touch the talismans around their necks when a ship limps into harbor with fewer crew than it set out with. None of them will admit outright that they believe in ghost ships, but they all have rules for avoiding them. Some stories grow teeth and travel inland. Merchants who've never set foot on a deck claim their cousin's brother vanished after chasing a light across the water. A priest in a far-off parish gives sermons about the dangers of greed, weaving in the tale of a crew who boarded a derelict for its cargo and found themselves cursed. Children dare each other to whisper the names of lost ships into wells at night. And then there are the dreams. Those don't care if you believe or not. Sailors who've never seen the ghost ship wake in the small hours, with the taste of salt in their mouths and the sound of ropes creaking in their ears. They swear they've stood on its deck, felt the boards shift under their feet, seen the shadow of a man leaning against the rail just far enough away to keep his face hidden. They wake sweating, their hearts hammering, and they avoid the water for days. You wonder sometimes if the ship wants this, if the legend is part of it as much as its masts or its deck. Every telling keeps it alive, even the ones warped beyond recognition. Every whispered warning plants a seed in some mind, so when they see a pale shape through the fog, they'll already know it's waiting for them. It would be easy to tell yourself it's just a story now, something to fill the time between voyages, to trade for drinks in the tavern. But you've seen the way the air changes when someone says they've spotted a vessel moving against the wind. You've felt the stillness that falls over a crew when the horizon swallows a ship whole. You've smelled that rot that no rain can wash away. And you know that somewhere, the ghost ship is still out there, listening, waiting for its next story. You've made it this far, somehow. If you were born in the wrong century and unlucky enough to set foot on a deck in the age of medieval sail, you might imagine that surviving a ghost ship encounter would make you one of the lucky ones. You'd be wrong. The truth is, you wouldn't survive. Not with the food rotting in the hold, not with the disease that sweeps through cramped quarters, not with the storms that could gut a vessel in minutes. The ghosts would just finish what the world had already started. But let's say you did survive. Let's say you somehow made it back to shore, skin still warm, lungs still pulling air. You'd never really come back. The ship would stay with you, stitched into the seams of your mind. You'd taste the brine in every drink, hear the slow, dragging footfalls in every silence, feel that drop in temperature whenever you passed a darkened doorway. The cold wouldn't leave your bones. The shadows wouldn't stop moving just outside your vision, and you'd start waiting for the day it found you again. You have the luxury now of thinking of the sea as a thing you can master. Steel hulls, GPS navigation, radios calling out across open channels, life jackets, flares, engines that can outrun a storm. But imagine the world before all of that, when the wind was your only engine and the stars your only map, when a change in the sky could strand you, when a torn sail could mean the difference between landfall and a grave at the bottom of the ocean. And imagine that in that already fragile world, something else was out there. Something that didn't need the wind, that didn't drift with the current, that could find you no matter where you ran. You'd have nothing to stop it, no way to explain it, no way to call for help, no way to make anyone believe you, even if you lived long enough to try. You'd be just another nameless sailor lost to the sea, your story swallowed and reshaped into something the taverns could use to scare their drinkers into buying another round. The ghost ship doesn't care if you're brave. It doesn't care if you pray or curse, if you clutch a relic or spit into the wind. It will close the distance without wind or oar, and the sea around it will still, and when its deck rises alongside yours, you'll know there's no good choice left. If you board, you won't come back whole. If you stay, it will still take something from you. Either way, it leaves its mark. You can tell yourself you'd be clever, that you'd find some way to slip past it. to cut it out of your story before it can make itself a part of you. But ships have been meeting their shadow for centuries, and none have outrun it. Some say it's not even a ship at all, but a piece of the sea that remembers every man and woman it's ever claimed, wearing their faces and their clothes so it can come closer without you knowing until it's too late. So, if you see pale sails where no sails should be, turn away. If you smell the rot before you see the hull, don't look for the source. If the water goes still in the middle of a strong wind, don't wait to understand why, because you won't survive. And if you do, you'll wish you hadn't. The wind rises, the rigging creaks. Somewhere in the dark, the waves whisper against the hull, not loud enough to wake you, but enough to follow you into your dreams.